Let's welcome in our panelists for this hour. We're happy to have Jenna Ellis, Newsmax contributor, former attorney to President Trump. Also joining us, Stacey Washington, host of Stacey on the Right podcast on SiriusXM and co-chair of Project 21. Bobby Eberle is here as well, Republican strategist and host of the 13-Minute News Hour. Panelist, thanks for coming on today. Happy Friday to everyone here. We made it to the end of the week, and we are covering a lot of serious topics today. So let's get right into it. Jenna Ellis, start us off here. Your thoughts on what we just heard from the congressman and now the importance of education when it comes to reaching out to voters ahead of the midterms.
I think education is going to be a critical issue going into 2022, especially with what we saw in Virginia. Listen, this isn't just about what's being taught in schools. This is about the fundamental nature of parental rights. For Terry McAuliffe to say that parents don't have a say in their children's education, that speaks even more than just critical race theory or exactly what's being taught in schools. That speaks to the Democrats' platform being that parents don't have a say and don't deserve to direct the education and the upbringing of their children. This country was founded on the premise that parental rights are fundamental. They're one of the fundamental rights that God gives us and that the Constitution is designed to preserve and protect. So this is all about reorienting our government to understanding that it does not control the health, safety, and welfare of our children. Parents do.
And you know what? Parents are the ones who are motivated, Stacey. They are active and involved in what their children learn every day, and they want to have their voices heard. And that's what we saw play out in Virginia.
Well, it's not so much that parents want to have their voices heard. Parents fund the schools. They send the children that attend the schools. They actually form up the groups that support the teachers that enable the work to be done in the classroom on a daily basis. And as a former elected school board member, I can tell you it never would have crossed my mind to tell a parent that they didn't have a right to address me and share their concerns with me so that I could represent them well on a school board. I remember many times being in the Walgreens with my basket of things that you buy at Walgreens, if you know what I mean, and having a parent come up to me right there and say, I'm so glad I bumped into you because this is my concern. And it would never cross my mind to say, you don't have any business saying that to me or telling me what your concerns are. So these school boards are out of touch and they need to have mass replacements, mass resignations, and parents are going to see to that over the next year. Virginia was just the beginning.
And we saw, we had a panel of newly elected school board members on our program just a few days ago. So you are seeing it take place, Bobby. People who have never been involved in politics before, they say, I want to say on this board for my child.
Absolutely. And, you know, they always say that all politics is local. This is a unique situation going into 2022 because we have the local issues actually spreading around the country. The Democrats have overplayed their hand, pushing parents aside, saying we know better about your children's education than you do. They are fining parents, charging them just to find out what the schools are teaching. Parents are fed up. I live in a very diverse county outside of Houston, and this transcends any kind of racial or ethnic boundaries to put parents first or families first. That is a winning issue going into 2022. Parents are fed up, like you said, Emma. They're fighting back, and we're going to see more and more turnover, not only in school boards, but any places where Democrats are in control, if they show that this is how they lead and parents are last.
You know, I love having these panelist discussions because we often are able to analyze media coverage of these main and major stories nationwide. And Jenna, what we've seen from several outlets is just denying the fact that CRT or race-based curriculum is even being taught in school. And we repeatedly see parents who are saying, that's not true. It is. We're speaking out. What do you think the mainstream media is missing about this story?
Well, they're missing fact and truth, and they're missing coverage of anything that's remotely relevant to what's going on today. What you're seeing from the mainstream media is that they are pushing their own narrative, and they're willing to completely discount what is plainly obvious to every parent, every concerned citizen, and every American. And that's why you're seeing the ratings of other networks go so far down, because people don't want to be lied to. People just want to discuss the issues. And even if we in this country have a diversity of opinion, that's okay. But that's why we have to have the freedom of speech. That's why we shouldn't be censored in speaking out about our opinions and being able to have input in school boards, be able to have input in who we elect, for example. I mean, that's exactly why we have elections. And so for the mainstream media to not be willing to cover these things and cover them honestly and fairly, that just shows how far the press has become activists rather than journalists.
Well, we've got a lot more media analysis on tap for this hour. So panelists, please stay with us. Still more to cover.
Turning once again to the latest in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, the defense rests after days of explosive and emotional testimony back and forth with the judge. Closing arguments set to begin Monday. But nevertheless, the mainstream media, however, isn't taking any breaks in its attacks against Rittenhouse. Hosts of The View even going so far as to label Rittenhouse a murderer, despite no verdict being reached just yet. Sunny Hostin, one of the hosts on that show, she had this to say.
He has become this right-wing cause celeb. And so I wonder if he is convicted of this, he now becomes a right-wing martyr. If he is freed, it's a message to others like him that prison won't be in their future. And so I do wonder.
If he's free, he'll end up in Congress probably.
And he could end up in Congress.
I mean,
so what does that say about our values as a country?
Jenna Ellis, Stacey Washington, Bobby Eberle back with us here. I've got to go straight to Jenna on this. Break this down legally. There was a soundbite where Hostin says that he murdered 2 people. Killed 2 people would be accurate. Murdered is, he's not convicted, by the way, and this also is a self-defense trial. But this is what's out there, and people do watch these shows, Jenna.
Yeah, and there was also a headline from another national news outlet that tweeted, even in their headline, calling him and designating him a murderer yesterday. And that is a legal designation that requires a conviction. And so could he be the next Nicholas Sandmann after all of this? Quite possibly. But this is all about the mainstream media, again, trying to influence people to form their opinion before due process actually reaches a verdict. And so for the mainstream media and the leftists to call him a murderer rather than say and even alleged, or to say he killed 2 people, which at this point is factually accurate, could spell disaster and could cause other legal ramifications for these media outlets. And if in fact he is not convicted of these charges, there may be some libel lawsuits potentially that could be brought.
And that's what I was getting at in a different block, and I want to keep it there if we can, because these political pundits, hosts of shows, politicians, very brazen in the words they use. And this, you've got to keep in mind, is a legal battle happening in court now. It's not done. And in the time for discussion, and I get the court of public opinion happens regardless, right? But here's where we are. Stacey Washington, I want to get your thoughts on this, because among those words used where he murdered people, inaccurate, by the way, at this point. Stacey, the other words that were used were white supremacy, vigilante, domestic terrorist. Does this case have anything to do with race?
No, it doesn't. No one who's involved is of color. I'm not sure what we're calling ourselves now. I happen to be Great Negro on Twitter right now because thanks to Joe Biden. But I'll tell you this, there's an interesting thing here. I'm not a lawyer. I leave all of that analysis to Jenna, who is preeminently qualified. But I learned when I was a kid in Bible class that murder indicates premeditation. The Bible even delineates that if you kill a person accidentally in the course of your work or driving or doing something, the Bible talks about your axe head flying off and killing someone, you are not actually guilty of murder because you didn't know it was going to happen. So you need some forethought of that. So there's an issue here, and it has nothing to do with race. It's about being able to defend yourself. The message that will be sent, I need to correct Sunny Hostin, is that people who defend themselves during these riots, because the riots will return, Democrats love these things, if you defend yourself, you will be guilty of murder, which is a complete, it's like taking our whole system of governance and our whole system of justice and twisting it into a nasty, dirty thing. In America, you're innocent until proven guilty by a jury of your peers, and you have the right to defend yourself. It's called the Second Amendment. They want to destroy that, and that's what they're trying to use this case to do.
In public opinion, the judge and jury, it's immediate. I forget which politician it was that said he's guilty and lock him up. That was a recent too. Bobby Eberle, I want to show you this tweet. If we have the tweet from Tulsi Gabbard, not the soundbite. But here's what she said. She's slamming media for their coverage. Says, with no evidence, mainstream media and Antifa-loving politicians immediately labeled Rittenhouse a white supremacist terrorist. It's obvious now that he was just a foolish kid who felt he needed to protect people and the community from rioters and arsonists because the government failed to do so. Bobby Eberle, would you go so far as to say the media failed to do so in embracing coverage of the riots, the looting, the burning, and people were killed in these riots in the summer of 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. And to go back to how the question was asked in the previous block, what are the media missing? I don't think the media are missing anything. I think this is a conscious, purposeful effort to push public opinion in a certain direction. Basically, what the View hosts were saying is that if there's rioting, then you have to embrace BLM and Antifa and all of these rioters, looters, vandals, people making assaults. You can't fight back. You have to accept that narrative. And if you do step forward and if you do fight back, then you are the bad guy. You are guilty until proven innocent. They didn't even care about the proof. This trial is done in their eyes. Rittenhouse is guilty, and that is a conscious effort by the media to push public opinion in a certain direction.
All right, Jenna Ellis, I want final thoughts, legal thoughts from you on this one. Closing argument set for Monday. What does the defense need to say? And then I would argue more importantly, what does the prosecution need to say to the jury at this time?
Yeah, well, what I've been saying about the prosecution, and listen, I've been a prosecutor, I've been a defense attorney, and prosecutors have a higher calling and actually an ethical obligation to do whatsoever justice requires. Justice is their client. For the prosecutors at this point to not willingly withdraw the charges of intentional homicide without justification, I don't think the evidence supports that, and I think they are actually ethically bound to not even proceed with this case. And so for the prosecution, this has become wholly political. And so that's probably going to be the nature of their closing arguments, is just to stir up all of the political banter around this. And you've seen the judge come down harshly on that because this is a court of law, not a court of public opinion. And for the defense, I think they just need to hammer home the fact that self-defense is an affirmative defense, and clearly that's what the evidence shows.
Rittenhouse facing 5 felonies, potential life in prison, with the highest charge of one of those there. The closing arguments will begin Monday. We'll find out a lot next week, though, again, as we pointed out on this panel, the court of public opinion, that continues 24/7. Jenna Ellis, Stacey Washington, Bobby Eberle, they're our panelists for today. Have a great weekend. Loved all the conversations. It was great. Thank you.
All right, friends, thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And before you go, please hit that subscribe button above. Once you do, tell your friends, share it, spread the word about the 13-minute news hour so we can keep growing. And for more great content, check out these videos right here, and I'll see you next time.